I want to start right off the bat by saying that we have a constant ongoing argument here that the team of the decade in the noughties was in fact Tyrone, because they beat Kerry in all of the big games that they ended up playing them. And so while Kerry might have more All-Irelands in the big matches that actually mattered, Tyrone come out on top. And yet in your book you give them these little crumbs of comfort where you say, well, actually on paper, and I'm very disappointed by this, on paper Kerry actually have a case.
They have a case. I suppose they did the back-to-back. We couldn't do the back-to-back, so I'm jealous about that. Now you're looking at Dublin potentially doing 5 in a row, so I think they win. Dublin wins, and look here, I'll take second, and I will throw Kerry third for the
there you go. That's exactly it. Yeah.
That's an ambush there from Ger straight off the bat. Once I saw that, I was like, my heart lifted for a moment. I was like, I may or may not have won this argument once and for all, but I come from a very biased point of view, I think.
The killer line, though, was actually that Armagh was your real rivals at that period as opposed to Kerry.
You were, yeah. Like at that time, Armagh won in 02, and it probably angered us enough to go out and prove ourselves in 03. Now, it helped at the same time. We had an amazing team coming all from that 98 minor team, and we won minors in 01, and times were good underage and Tyrone then, and we just had a collective group of players that come through which were used to winning and weren't fearing any team, including Kerry's, including Dublin's. And I pined whenever I sat down and went through the pieces with Damien for the book. You realise that we had it really good back then. You always reminisce about good old times, but that was a serious group of lads and a serious group of character-filled individuals that nothing really fazed. We had plenty of nasty and good and skillful and elaborate footballers back then.
Sometimes they're all in the same person.
And sometimes Ryan McManaman was that man. But yeah, look, it's with fond memories, and being able to get the time to sit back and chat through some of the stories that we had and some of the games that we played back then. It was some of the best moments.
Just to labour the point in the rivalry for a bit, because it is really interesting. Like it feels like there's a bit of a golden period of football there when we look back in retrospect. The quality of your team, the quality of that Kerry team, the quality of that Armagh team. I can see why people at the moment are kind of pining a little bit for proper rivalries. Your rivalry with Armagh was elevated to a point where the Ulster final was in Croke Park, and it was
set out there, very close to it.
Exactly,
yeah, so
and because of the quality of football that was on display, people were actually coming to it from outside Armagh and Tyrone.
Yeah, and even that game in Croke Park, I remember the first game, for as brilliant as Francie Bellew was, I remember Stephen O'Neill hit him for maybe 11 points or something that day. So inside forwards were very much in their prime at that point in time. We obviously had Cavanagh knocking around and Muggsy, and it's only maybe whenever you're looking at the players that are currently with Tyrone and you're thinking, how do they compare? And it's just completely different. You can't compare them because we had natural scoring forwards that loved to stay up the pitch as much as possible, and we could rely on them even though they weren't tracking back or doing the work. And to be honest, I didn't track back and do that much work. Kevin Hughes done that for me. I was one of those guys that loved just to go forward, but nowadays our game has gone into a completely running game that resembles probably more of a rugby style hand passing drill. And then by the time maybe the shot comes off, it doesn't come off right, and it can be ugly at times. But look, when it's done right, that type of game, it can be attractive as well. But Dublin's dominance doesn't help it either.
Did you hate Armagh? Did you hate that team?
Hate's a strong word, but yeah, I hated them. Coming from the Moy, it was right on the border. I went to school in Armagh. Everything revolved around the rivalry, because Armagh had probably their greatest. Yeah, that's myself and Kieran in the final of 03. So
is that when he tries to get you sent off?
No, that is 05. So that is a couple of years earlier than the point he tried to get me sent off. But that Tyrone Armagh thing was unique. I remember before the final, people saying, is there going to be rows in the stands? How there's so much hatred there, and it turned out to be a momentous occasion. Now, it helped that they had won 12 months earlier, and it probably was softened by that. But there's a real mutual respect as well. We always loved to hate people in Tyrone, and we loved to sometimes create a bit of a siege. But at the same time, when you sat back and you realise some of the individuals they had, and the McDonald's and McConvilles and McGreens and McGeeney's, then it's probably Armagh's greatest ever team going against Tyrone's greatest ever team.
Yeah.
And being in so close proximity and managed by two really big personalities as well, it was a golden time in Ulster football. And living in the Moy and having a split club where maybe 20% or 15% of our club members are all Armagh, it certainly felt a little bit more personal. And Yeah, it's certainly enjoyable. Getting the better of them was enjoyable, particularly in 03 and the game in 05, the semi-final of 05, I would have down as probably the most important game of my career, and something that it was the end of that trilogy, and they had beaten us in controversial circumstances in that replay of Ulster in Croke Park, and yeah, Canovan's free happening and me dragging him off the ground and trying to get him to hit it. It just, the circumstances and the intenseness of that game was something that was unrivaled to the rest of my career.
Don't rush that bit, because that bit's pretty interesting, where what we see and what's in everybody's heads is Muggsy laughing and joking like they're out kind of just having training in the schoolyard and kind of throwing the ball to Canavan, and it looked to me like the teacher was coming over to take the ball off and going, listen, don't worry. In retrospect, you probably think Muggsy didn't necessarily fully worry that much about these kinds of things and probably would have kicked the point anyway, but before all that, something happens. You have to...
Yeah, so like the free kick, Stevie won the free kick. I was trying to support Stevie, and I remember the free kick being given and seeing where it was and just looking around to see where Canavan was, and he was along where the technical managerial areas are there in the front of Hogan's stand, and I ran back 20-30 metres to grab him, and he was down. I'm not sure whether he was tired or injured. I didn't really care at that point. I literally ran over to him and I grabbed him by the back of the jersey and I said, Canavan, you're hitting this. And he looked at me and he said, no, Sean, Muggsy's hitting them all day, let him hit it. And I says, no, you're hitting this. And I literally grabbed him by the scruff of the back of the jersey and walked him about 5 metres. Now, after those 5 metres, I let him go. I thought he was, that was it. And yeah, seeing the exchange with Muggsy obviously caught the headlines, but I was glad I did that at that point, and particularly with the Tyrone Armagh thing, and knowing that that was the one opportunity we'd maybe have to beat that Armagh team. I was glad I made that decision. That
matters more because it comes in the middle. Is that why, in retrospect, it's the most important game, or did it feel like at the time it was the most important game?
I think it was just ourselves and Armagh. I think I would count that 2005 team as the greatest team that I played on, and I think Armagh and getting to know some of their players, even after that, they would say that was the greatest team they had as well. So when you have two teams in such close proximity at their height of their powers, and two great teams that were, and you know, it's that was the moment. I think if Armagh had have won that semi-final, I suspect they probably would have beaten Kerry as well.
So in 08, is it 08 where you talk about it? It's a relief that you're actually playing Kerry in the final, that there's like less tension around that?
Yeah, and in 05, and like, because Armagh was there, and because they were such a fairly unstoppable force in those early 2000s, and because we put so much energy into trying to match up against them and some of their individuals, whenever Kerry come along, it didn't feel, it was you know what, it's Kerry. I know they're good, but they're not Armagh. So Armagh was a great distraction for us back then, to be able to, whenever they get out of the road, then we really opened up, and probably none more so than in 05, because the semi-final was a tense affair. It could have went either road, and it was full of mistakes, but it equally was full of excitement as well. And then we got to the final, and we did open up, and we had some serious scores against Kerry. So it's almost a bit like the Dublin team nowadays, whereby we could play a game in a defensive battle as well as opening up and take teams on, and we fancied ourselves to do that against Kerry.
Yeah, definitely. Like, looking back at that 05 final, that goal, the Canavan goal past Diarmuid Murphy, is one of my favourite things ever, because you can kind of just see
it's coolness personified, and that's what Canavan was. Canavan's probably the smartest player I've ever played with, in that he could equally, you know, he made the names an inside forward, but particularly in 05, he remember up in Clonus playing Gavin in the replay, and he played at number 11, and he might have scored 1-7 or 1-8, and was seamless, and maybe set up another 6 or 7 scores. He just was one of those guys who just knew what to do under pressure, and playing with him was an absolute dream, because he knew how to always create space for you. Even as a lad, he was my hero coming on to that team in 2002, and I remember getting the butterflies in my stomach, even seeing him standing and training, and one of the first things he did was take me aside and say, you know, I'm going to do this drill with you on a 2-on-2 drill or whatever it was. And to have that as someone who was quite daunting, going on to a Tyrone team at the age of 18, but Canavan was every bit of a god that they refer to him.
Is his son as good as everybody says he is? Is he as good as Peter?
Apparently so, yeah. I've seen him a couple of times. They are amazingly excited about him up and around Tyrone at the moment, and I think he will start to hit the headlines from next year onwards, hopefully.